We're also going to speak to investments in officer wellness, to identify officers in trouble before it is too late, to link our officers with the support they need to stay healthy, to bring their very best selves to the people they're sworn to serve and protect, to help them avoid deadly mistakes. Chief Quinlan will speak to this effort in just a few minutes. In addition to the Chief, I'm happy to be joined by Council President Hardin, who will speak about City Council's ongoing efforts to reform and bring justice in our community. Specifically today, he will speak to advancing Andre's Law and to ensure proper care and potentially life-saving aid is rendered to those shot or injured by police. And before we end, you'll hear from Asleen Rodriguez, who will speak to how all of these changes and many more are part of our ongoing efforts to change how we police, restore community trust, and keep neighborhoods safe. Asleen was a member of our Civilian Review Board work group, and I'm grateful for her service and for joining us today. We first began outfitting Columbus Police with body-worn cameras in 2016. And while we invested in the best camera system at the time, as with all technology, body-worn cameras have since improved. This year, the city will invest in the next generation of body-worn cameras to assure cameras are recording and audio is captured when we need it most. New body-worn cameras will come with increased resolution and enhanced video clarity, and through wireless technology will also sync with new dashboard cameras being installed in cruisers right now. In addition, the cameras can be set to automatically activate when an officer exits the cruiser on a priority call for service. We will also begin work to modify new and existing body-worn cameras to increase the look-back capabilities to ensure cameras are always recording with audio, regardless of whether an officer activates the camera, regardless of whether an officer is on an emergency run, and regardless of whether new automatic record technology functions properly. This always-on function will help ensure that any critical incident and anything immediately leading up to the incident is captured on video with audio. Combined, the automatic record features, synced dashboard cameras, and the enhanced look back feature will deliver the video evidence the city expects and the public demands. Bottom line, if this technology was in place in December, we would have higher resolution video and audio evidence leading up to and including the shooting death of Andre Hill, period. The city has set aside $4.5 million for these upgrades and will work with City Council to identify additional resources if necessary. We will begin installing these cameras this year. We will also work with the FOP to renegotiate the current MOU for body-worn cameras to ensure the extended camera look-back setting is aligned with the contract and is legally permissible. I invite the FOP's support for these common sense changes that will protect our officers and the public. Now, I'd like to introduce our great partner in all of this reform work, our legislator, Council President Shannon Hardin, who will talk about another area of focus for he and council in police reform. The council will be leading with my full support in backing Andre's Law. President Hardin.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for that announcement. Thank you to Chief Quinlan and to my friend Asleen Rodriguez. In late December, Mr. Andre Hill went to drop off Christmas money to a friend. A neighbor called the police on Mr. Hill, and when the police arrived on the scene, and Andre Hill was shot. This officer had not activated his body-worn camera to record the incident. The only way we were able to see the incident, as the mayor said, was because of a look-back feature on these cameras. Neither Officer Coy nor his partner administered medical aid to Mr. Hill. He posed no threat to either of them. Eventually, a different officer performed chest compressions, and Mr. Hill, died at the hospital over a half an hour later following that shooting. We all had a lot of conversations and a lot of questions after that incident. Why didn't the officer turn on his camera in time? Why wasn't aid rendered immediately when Mr. Hill clearly posed no threat? And how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? In the days following Mr. Hill's death, his family talked about the idea of Andre's Law. Andre's Law aims to ensure that safety officers use their body-worn cameras properly and call for medical aid or deliver medical aid themselves. It is imperative to strengthen rules surrounding the use of body-worn cameras and requirements to render aid, not only in CPD policy, but also in law. So council is proposing the following changes to the Columbus City Codes. 1, requiring the activation of body-worn cameras during any enforcement action or other situation outlined in the directives of the Columbus Division of Police. 2, requiring police to request aid from emergency medical services upon use of force that results in a serious bodily harm, as well as the rendering of medical aid under certain circumstances. Those who violate these new chapters can be subject to discipline per city policy and the collective bargaining agreement. However, in cases of egregious and willful violation of the new chapter pertaining to rendering aid, the city may pursue remedies beyond discipline and could seek criminal charges for dereliction of duty. We also recognize that the Division of Police has been working to improve their directives by tightening the rules and closing loopholes. We will be working with safety officials to ensure this legislation is aligned with their directives. Andre's Law will not solve all police violence, but it's one more step in the right direction to ensure we know what is happening on the scene based on body cam footage, and ensure that if residents are hurt, peace officers are there to render the aid. And if officers don't comply, that there can be greater accountability. Council plans to introduce this legislation on Monday, the 25th. It may be amended as we continue to strive towards the best bill possible, but we aim to pass this piece of legislation in short order thereafter. With that, I'd like to introduce my friend and member of the Civilian Review Working Board, Ms. Azleen Rodriguez.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and good morning. As a member of the Civilian Review Working Group, I'm encouraged by the steps the city is taking for police reform today. These are critical steps that will ensure that communities can restore their trust. As Mayor Ginther said, having facts and evidence is crucial. I and my fellow board members learned a lot during the process. We looked at our peer cities, we looked at best practices, and those best practices were meant to be implemented so that we can truly have accountability, to account for one's actions, and to bring, as the mayor said, to help our police officers bring their very best selves to serve and protect. And this is about restoring community trust. Today is a step that I think is crucial for making our community know that we hear what's happening, we see what's happening, and we will not stand by idly without making the appropriate actions for accountability. I look forward to continued discussions within our community of how to build this trust back, and also how to be supportive of those within the force that need the help they need to overcome whatever hurdles they're having so that they can bring their best selves to work. I appreciate this opportunity, and I truly, truly look forward to making our community amazing for everyone. And it is
Thank
now
you, Ms.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to thank you for your service, and that all that you have done, all of your colleagues that worked on the work group with all those recommendations. incredibly important work. As you probably know now, there were over 200 of our neighbors who applied to serve on that civilian review board. And I think it's in large part because of the clarity, the focus, and the hard work of you and your colleagues that were part of the work group. So just want to thank you for that. I want to turn now to our Chief of Police, Tom Quinlan, to ask the Chief to talk about our investment in new technology to help support our officers, to help them deal with the incredible rigor and stress of their jobs in serving the public, and to help avoid deadly encounters. Chief Quinlan, thanks for joining us, and look forward to your update.
Thank you. My thanks to Azleen Rodriguez for her work and Council President Hardin for his leadership on this law, and thank you, Mayor, for this opportunity today. Body-worn cameras by officers have proven to be an asset, not a hindrance to officers and the public, for safety, for transparency, and for accountability. I welcome new technologies and body-worn devices that will improve the field of vision, the battery life, the storage capacity, automatic activations, and the ability to live stream an officer's interactions to supervisors in an operations center. This will also prove very valuable as we work towards acquiring a real-time crime center by allowing officers' encounters to be viewed in real time from an operations center where analysts can begin developing leads and persons of interest based on what is being shared from the field without taking an officer away from the immediate task at hand. I'm also working with members of the Chief's Community Advisory Panel to develop a method of analyzing officers' interactions with the public so we can better serve our community and better train our officers by eliminating blind spots we all experience. And that'll be done through a proactive outside research on body cam interactions. Over the past summer, I submitted my 2021 budget request for consideration. My request included the latest technology for body-worn camera systems, but also included the recommendations for Matrix and the Columbus Community Safety Advisory Commission that focuses on officer wellness and early intervention systems, as well as advances in technologies needed to generate greater proactive time for officers on patrol. Two important components of the recommendations are being discussed here today. One is the early intervention system that I am seeking to implement. Currently, we have an outdated system called the Employee Action Review System that looks at isolated incidents of citizen complaints and uses of force over time, but always in the distant past, never in real time. Rarely has this system identified an officer in need of an intervention or developed a performance improvement plan that has proven effective to remedy the concerns identified. This new system I am seeking will be more of a dashboard system where supervisors will be able to check in on their officers from a wide array of areas that might be more predictive of an officer in need of an intervention for their wellness and for the public good. The intervention system will more accurately balance an officer's on-the-job experiences and performance with areas, as we've learned over time, lead to an officer needing assistance. Areas considered simultaneously include such reviews as performance evaluations, training, uses of force and citizen complaints, internal affairs investigations, and community engagement. Further, human resource concerns like the number and severity of injuries, sick mark-offs, address changes, and notices of financial defaults may be examined. Another key area to review focuses on the number of critical incidents and the nature of those incidents officers experience. For instance, consider an officer has recently been a first responder on a SIDS death, a teen traffic fatality, 3 overdose deaths, 2 homicides, a suicide, and 5 domestic violence calls, all within a month's time. Looking at these critical encounters, has the officer had a change of address, numerous sick mark-offs, or recently missed training or failed recertifications? These are the officers we want to engage in an early intervention and offer resources to assist them through whatever their struggles are in their personal and work life. When officers are distracted by the normal pressures of life we all endure, but also are bombarded with some of the most intense and gut-wrenching encounters officers far too often experience on the job. We need to ensure their well-being so officers can ensure the public's. This system is designed to be non-punitive. It is designed to help officers so they are better prepared to help the public. This leads me to the update on the Joint Police Fire Wellness Center that the mayor is providing to first responders in our community. The 5,600 square foot facility is located on the near east side of town. This center will increase resiliency of Columbus first responders and is intended to reduce traumatic stress symptoms and general stress in our personnel while promoting highly effective first responders for our residents. The center is for both police and fire responders, where there will be access to peer assistance members, employee assistance, professional counselors, division chaplains, and other resources to help ensure the emotional health and healing. Personnel will be able to use the facility to debrief critical incidents used to learn lessons going forward. Officers are people who experience hardships in life like all of us, but officers also are exposed to some of the most horrific encounters people commit against their own family members, against vulnerable populations, and to one another. It is vital we provide these resources to our officers so officers who are responding to the public's calls for service arrive prepared for, respond appropriately to, and go beyond the call. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Chief. The mental health of our officers is critical to their health and well-being and the safety of our community. I want to thank you for all of your work and leadership on these issues and our overall reform efforts. Police reform and improving community-police relations is not something that happens with the flip of a switch. It takes time, effort, collaboration on all fronts. As your elected and appointed officials and concerned community members, I assure you, we continue to work diligently each day to improving the safety of all of our residents. Now we'll take a few questions. Our technology director, Sam Orth, has joined us for maybe any technical questions folks may have about the different systems. We're going to use the raise hand function. I know you were sent instructions, but let's go through them quickly. You should see a hand icon in the bottom right corner of your screen. Click on the hand and you'll see a hand next to your name in the attendee list. That's how we know you have raised your hand. We'll unmute you to ask your question. Please tell us your name, what media outlet you're with. After your question's been addressed, please click the hand next to your name to turn off the function. And if you have any additional questions or a follow-up, please click it again. With that, we'll take your questions. And I think the first question, is it from Bennett Haberly?
Yes, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, this is Bennett Haberly with WBNS 10 TV. My understanding is the current 60-second look-back feature that we have on the body-worn cameras was something that was negotiated between the city and the police union. So I guess my question is, knowing that that technology already exists, that we could have had a longer look-back feature, how much responsibility falls on those who are currently in charge versus just the need for new technology?
Well, I think, clearly what we've shared today is the need to amend that MOU. The people have been very clear that they want police reform and accountability. I think we have made that clear as well. And the FOP needs to decide if it stands with the people or not. I have complete faith that body-worn cameras have done a great deal to protect our officers and the public. And this additional change, I think there's going to be widespread support for, and look forward to a very expedited amended MOU process with the FOP. This is a separate item from the FOP negotiations. Next question, Bethany Bruner.
Good morning, Mayor, city leaders. This is Bethany Bruner partner with the Columbus Dispatch. You said you wanted to have these new body cameras implemented by the end of the year. Can you talk a little bit more about what that timeline looks like? Who has to approve what and when, and how realistic a timeline there is? When within the year could people expect to see this technology on officers' chests?
Appreciate the question. And, obviously this is going to take a complete team effort, the legislative branch working with the administration. I want to start the implementation of this new technology this year. I'm not sure if we'll have it fully completed by the end of the year, but this is a top priority for me and for City Council in 2021. And so happy to have either Director Orth or Chief Quinlan speak to some of the timelines, but I know that there is, the capital budget says there's $1.5 million that we approved earlier. There's an additional $3 million in the police operating budget. We know that this will cost probably more than $4.5 million to upgrade all of the cameras. And Council President and I are going to be working together to identify those resources. The resources will be there, but with respect to timelines on implementation, I don't know, Director Orth or Chief Quinlan, do you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everybody. With regard to timelines and the current technology that this city owns, which is known as WatchGuard, the current storage environment and software that's used to manage the evidence that comes off the cameras is already in place. And the addition of new cameras would be relatively straightforward in that we would just be adding additional cameras to our current environment. There does need to be procurement and, as the mayor indicated, some work around the budget. But as the mayor said before, given our current environment, we think we can have these implemented in 2021.
Chief or Council President, any additional questions or comments on that? Okay. Our next question, Director, you said 2020. I know you meant 2021.
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Next question, Maria Durant. Morning.
Hi, good morning, Mayor. Good morning, city leaders. Can you hear me? We okay?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. This question may be directed best to the chief in talking about early intervention. Chief, have you already looked into how many officers that you believe that would already need this type of intervention? And would this be a recommendation, a requirement? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, thank you, Maria. So right now, because the technology is not in place in-house, we don't know. Right now, all the information we want to gather is stored in multiple different databases. And someone, human time has to sit down and try to go through 1,900 officers and multiple databases to try to collect that information, analyze it, and pick out someone that might be in need of an intervention. This system will automatically do that, computerize it through technology, and give a dashboard to a supervisor to see that maybe, again, based on the nature of runs, the number of times a person's moved recently, other factors, sick mark offset, maybe we need to check in with this officer and make sure they're doing well, make sure they're coping with all the calamity that they deal with in life and on the job. So those will be what the system's designed to identify.
Thank you, Chief. Our next question is from Adrian Robbins. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for taking our questions today. I have a question for Council President Hardin and also Chief Quinlan. When it comes to Andre's Law, you said that this is something you'd like to see in Columbus, but also, I assume, statewide. Are you still hoping that we could see a state law that mirrors what you're talking about at the city level? And for Chief Quinlan, is this something, after hearing what the Council President laid out, is this something you and your officers would support?
President Hardin.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Adrian, for the question. A lot of the things that we are talking about in terms of police reform we would welcome state partnership and state engagement on. Some things are just completely outside of our control. I know that I've heard from some of our legislative leaders, specifically from the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus, that they are going to advance a version of Andre's Law, and we would be happy to share where we are right now, what information the process that we have gone through and working with the city attorney's office, the mayor's office, the department, and being responsive to the family to get to where we will be on Monday for first reading. Chief.
The only thing I would add before I have the chief speak to this, you know, at Andre Hill's homegoing, President Hardin, Representative Erica Crawley, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, all committed at different levels to work together in leading the charge. And so I want to thank Representative Crawley and Congresswoman Joyce Beatty for helping to lead the charge at the state and federal level on a parallel track with the council president here locally. I just wanted to acknowledge them. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Adrian, for the question. Short answer is yes, we will support legislation. Bottom line is officers take an oath to support and obey all the laws and ordinances of the city of Columbus and the rules and regulations of the Division of Police. We don't write the laws, we follow the laws. So if it becomes legislation, we'll absolutely follow that. I appreciate Council President Hardin giving me a seat at the table to help craft what the actual language and expectations are, so we make sure we can implement the law in its full intent.
Our next question is from Matthew, is it Herchik?
Yes, Matthew Herchik with NBC4. Thank you guys for taking my question. Mayor, first off, you mentioned negotiations with the FOP. Can you give us an update about where those negotiations stand? You've been outspoken about wanting to see changes to give the city more flexibility in terms of discipline. Can you give us an update on that? And Chief Quinlan, just how important is that for you on a day-to-day basis, and how important is that flexibility for what you do in managing all those officers?
Well, I appreciate the question, and you're absolutely right. You know, this negotiation process is critically important for us to see through the will of the people who overwhelmingly voted for reform and change. 75%, 74% of the people of this community voted in support of issue 2, which is creating a civilian review board with independence, the ability for independent investigations and inspector general with subpoena power. That is my top priority as we go into negotiations with the FOP. There are many other things that we have made priorities for negotiations. I believe that the FOP has heard the community, knows what the community is demanding, and they understand the sacred bond between the community and law enforcement, and that to stand in the way of reform, to oppose change, puts that sacred bond at risk for both our officers and the community, and that is unacceptable. So I look forward to negotiating in good faith, but focused on change and reform to make sure that we can move this entire community forward together. There was a short break due to COVID and a surge in December, but the city and the FOP and their representatives are back at the table now and working to address some of these issues. Chief Quinlan?
Thank you, Mayor. So let me be clear, I'm part of management. My focus on when we talk about discipline and matters of policy is to, one, find that balance between what the needs and interests of the officers are that I represent, but also be responsive and reflective of what city leaders and the public demand and expect from police. I find the common ground in all those and work towards those reforms to make sure that we hold officers accountable. That's why the early intervention system will be non-punitive and find a way to prevent. And also when misconduct does occur, our goal and officers' goals, they don't want to work with officers who are, put them at risk as well. So they would, support that we have ways to properly hold officers accountable.
Thank you, Chief. Our next question is from Catherine Ross. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, this is Catherine Ross from NBC4. My question is about Andre's Law as well. I know that City Council President Hardin said that under circumstances, officers would have to render aid to people involved in use of force incidents. I'm just curious what those specific circumstances would be and if there would be any kind of additional first aid training for officers.
I'll let Council President Hardin speak to that. I think it's important. This would build upon policies and procedures already in place for the Division of Police, but it would codify it and make clear and make sure that folks understood that this was the law of the community. So I just wanted to make that connection, but ask President Hardin to speak more to that, and the Chief as well, if you have any additional comments. President Hardin.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Catherine for that question. We're specifically talking about, egregious cases where there is excessive bodily harm done. As the Mayor stated, we're working closely with the police chief to make sure that this can be aligned with standard operating procedure, and that we are setting up realistic expectations about keeping both officer and our residents safe. And we think that this law gets us there. But we look forward. We are proposing this on Monday as first reading. We are still going through the legislative process as we engage. And so we look forward to making sure that additional information and ways to engage on this piece of legislation is before the public, before final passage at the earliest. The 1st of February, I think, would be the meeting where we would bring it for a final vote.
Thank you, President Hardin. Any comments, Chief?
Yes, Mayor. So one of the things we've been doing with fire already in the past has been training how to bring them into a scene while there's still activity going on. Currently, fire will wait nearby and not enter until the scene is secure. So the highest priority for officers, because we're not basic or advanced EMTs, our highest priority is to render immediate aid, but also get the experts in so we can save lives. And so we've worked with fire, and actually at the training academy, worked with different scenarios where we bring them into kind of what we call a warm zone so they can apply immediate first aid while officers are continuing to face any threats that may be in the area. So we are working with fire to do that. We are changing our policies to make sure that someone at scene, based on this legislation, tends to the victim while other officers are free to maintain, secure the scene and make it safe so fire can respond and the professionals can get in there and provide that treatment.
Thank you, Chief. Our next question is Mike McCarthy. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and officials. Thanks for taking my question. Can you hear okay?
Yes, sir.
I'm curious, when you talk about with the body cameras, all the technological advances involved with that, with the syncing between the cruiser and the officer, potential live streaming, the increased capacity for video, can you qualify in simple terms how much of a bandwidth leap that would be for the city in terms of processing all that video, storage, things like that? Can you explain kind of the logistics in simple terms of how big of a leap and how much of a technological challenge will there be to make that a reality?
Appreciate the question, Mike. And a man needs to know his limitations. So I will now turn to the technology director to speak to some of those questions you raised, Mike.
Good morning again, Mike. Thanks for the question. As you indicated, the newer cameras, the second generation cameras, do process at a higher quality, so better image quality and faster frame rates. So it does take more storage capacity to do that. The current cameras, compared to the newer cameras, have roughly double the number of pixels or information in the images. So it does take more processing power, more network capacity to transfer those videos into the evidence storage systems. We do have high-speed networks in the police substations and across the city, all connected together. So we're prepared to handle that additional capacity that's going to be required with the new cameras. And then lastly, the newer cameras also have networking technology built into the cameras. The current environment, officers have to go into the police substation to transfer the video. The newer cameras, because of the networking connectivity in the cameras, will allow that video to be transferred either in their cruisers or in their cruisers in the substations. So the city networks are essentially built to handle that additional capacity, as you point out.
I think the important part, Mike, that both your question and the director's response, I think reinforces that this is ongoing. This will be a journey, not a destination. Once we get the most up-to-date technology to help with accountability, oversight, transparency, we will continue to monitor enhancements and investments that need to be made. I know the Council President and I are committed to this for the long haul. This is not a one-time fix or upgrade or solution. But I appreciate the question, Director, your response. Bethany Bruner.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me an opportunity for another question here. I wanted to clarify one thing real quickly, that this would replace the current cameras. Ultimately, this isn't going to be in addition to. But I also wanted to talk about having officers render aid. I've heard from officers who say that their first aid kits, either at the substation or in their cruisers, sometimes they don't even have enough Band-Aids if somebody were to cut their hand. Is there going to be more given to officers so that they are capable of rendering aid, tourniquet kits, things like that, to help in these situations while they're waiting for medics and waiting for those scenes to be secure for them to get in? Or are we just simply going to ask them to put a hand on somebody's shoulder and say somebody's coming?
Well, I appreciate the question. The first part of the question, I believe, Director, I could even answer, and that is that these would be in replacement of the existing cameras. This would not be another camera. And second of all, the short answer is yes. We're committed to making sure that our officers, I know the Council President made this very clear to me, that the resources will be provided by he and his colleagues, and we will direct the chief and his team to make sure that the supplies, the resources, but also the training is available to our officers. President Hardin, any additional comments?
That's exactly what I was going to answer, yes.
Nick Evans, good morning.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, good morning.
Great. So I know that I've heard from President Hardin already. He said that one of his top priorities is developing an alternative to police response. And I'd love to know what you think, Mayor, and what you think, Chief Quinlan, about whether or not you're on board with that sort of thing. I know we've got mobile crisis response units, we've got REACT. I know there's, I think, like 20 FTEs coming in the next budget. Those are all kind of small efforts. I wonder where you guys stand on a robust sort of alternative to police response.
Well, I wouldn't classify the things that you just spoke to as being small efforts. They're very significant and have made a huge difference in the lives of the people they've served. I think in large part, we'd like to build on that. We'd like to expand that. And I am working closely with the Council President. He and I talk regularly. What we're committed to is getting the right response at the right time for people in need in our community. That may or may not be law enforcement, or it may or may not be the first folks on the scene. We need law enforcement. Our police officers play a very critical role. They are incredibly important to this community and the safety of our community. But we cannot continue to expect our officers to solve all of our community's problems. And it's important that we give a significant amount of thought listen to the community. The council president and his colleagues are engaged in an unprecedented process around public safety, hearing from hundreds and thousands of people about what that right response at the right time looks like, and what our community's expectations are moving forward. But it is not an either or, it is and. And we believe that having the appropriate response, the right response, will make our officers more successful and make our community safer. And so we look forward to working with him and his colleagues as we develop that. Chief Quinlan.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a very important point, Nick. Both Mayor Ginther and Council President Hardin have always been very clear on this point, and I want to be clear as well. Over my career, 30 plus years in law enforcement, things have constantly changed. Technology is constantly evolving, uniforms, training, hiring practice, everything's changing. The only thing that hasn't changed in my 30 years is the fact that every time we face a new dilemma, it becomes a law enforcement problem. It's always put more law enforcement on that. We need to start changing and look at new ways of conducting interactions with the public from a non-law enforcement role through the mobile crisis responders and the REACT teams and some of the other services that can address the problems in our community without making them a law enforcement issue. So the law enforcement professionals can focus on the safety aspects while others deal with providing resources and getting people to the help that they need. So I think that's the one thing that's been missing over my time in policing, that we're now finally being responsive to the public and making those changes.
The only thing I would add, Nick, is that I have charged the chief with leading a change at the Division of Police and going from a 20th century law enforcement organization to a 21st century community policing organization. We cannot do that if we don't work together with the council president and his colleagues, the chief and the community, on making sure we get the right response at the right time. There's no way we can do the community policing work if we continue to ask law enforcement to solve all of our community's problems. Our next question is, I think we're back to Bennett. Oh, I'm sorry, Council President, do you want to make a comment?
I do, just really quickly, two things. One, Nick, I appreciate that the question. It is my number one priority, but I also appreciate the mayor's engagement and leadership on this issue. But I think that for all of us, as we talk about reimagining safety, this is not a 1 year, one budget endeavor. This is going to take multiple years and multiple budgets. And so we are making progress in this budget, but we see this as a long-term effort. And the second point is we have more. I'm doing a plug for our next town hall, which will talk about these things. So we have a town hall tonight at 5:30, where Councilmember Dorans will talk about civilian review. But then on the 27th, Councilmember Tyson and Councilmember Favor will host another town hall on mobile crisis response unit that is talking about alternative crisis responses. So just wanted to add that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, President Hardin. I think we are back to Bennett.
Yes, thanks for the follow-up. One question I had was just for clarity purposes. Council President Hardin had mentioned that Andre's Law would address, the ability to have discipline. I'm assuming that means up to termination. And the other question was just, do you guys have a response to the FOP's statement, basically saying that they're open to discussions on this, but that they mentioned that they felt like the city was sort of disregarding and attacking the collective bargaining process?
Well, I'll speak to the second point. I don't know if President Hardin, if you want to speak to the legislation itself, but we don't subscribe to that. We are negotiating in good faith on many other things with respect to The look back provision of the existing cameras, that was separate from negotiations. It was a separate MOU. We look forward to amending that MOU as quickly as possible. Common sense, it's in the best interest of the officers and the community. We look forward to getting that done. And that's all I've got to say about that. President Hardin?
Thank you, Mayor. Just again, this is for cases of egregious violation of the new chapter pertaining to rendering aid. The city may pursue remedies beyond discipline and could seek criminal charges against violators for dereliction of duty. And this would be different. The discipline would be considered separately from use of force itself.
So I think we have one final question, but folks can feel free to reach out to the Council President's office or to Robin Davis in my office if you have additional questions, but want to respect everybody's time this morning. I think our final question goes to Maria Durant.
Hi, Mayor. Thank you once again for letting me ask a question. Just real quickly, this goes back to the body cameras. Can you talk about how that process is going to work on getting those cameras? Who's going to provide them? Will this be a process where you have to bid them out?
Director Orth, do you want to speak to that process? I know there are a couple of options that we're considering that might have different steps associated with them, but Director, you want to speak to that?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, there are a variety of procurement options that we would consider, both including our RFP, request for proposals, and potential use of state term schedules where these cameras are contracted. So several options, but likely going to be a request for proposal.
And I think I want to respect everybody's time. We asked for an hour. If there are any additional questions from the press or follow-up, please, you can direct those to Robin Davis in my office or the Council President's office, and we can get you a response either from the Director or the Chief as well. Ms. Rodriguez, Chief Quinlan, Director Orth, President Hardin, thank you for all of your work and for joining us here today. And to the press, have a great day. If you have any follow-up questions, please let us know. Take care.